Well, hello, everybody. Happy Earth Day, and welcome to our webinar, Building Childcare Resiliency in the Face of a Changing Climate. This webinar is presented in partnership with the Low Income Investment Fund and the National Association for the Education of Young Children. I'm Angie Garling, one of the co-hosts today, and really happy to be here with you. Let's go on to the next slide. What are we talking about today? So climate change is a pressing global challenge with profound implications for daily life. For early childhood educators, the increasing frequency and severity of extreme weather events like heat waves, hurricanes, wildfires, and floods pose real significant risks to the physical and mental health of children, caregivers, educators, and staff, which makes it increasingly difficult to keep their programs operational. These impacts can include and extend beyond immediate safety concerns, threatening to worsen the childcare crisis, harm community cohesion, and exacerbate social and economic inequalities. So we're going to be first talking about the need, and then we'll be talking about the challenge, and then finally, we will be talking about solutions. And we're really excited today to be bringing in voices of some of our educators to tell their personal stories and professional stories. Next slide, please. So who is speaking today? So I'm Angie Garling, Senior Vice President. I oversee the national early care and education work at the local Low Income Investment Fund. And we are a community development financial institution. We operate nationally with a deep focus in early care and education. And I'm really happy to have Alyssa Mwene-Lupembe here. She's the Chief Early Learning Quality and Research Officer with the National Association for the Education of Young Children. And she'll be co-hosting with me. And we both, our organizations both served on the U.S. Early Years Climate Action Task Force, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But we're really happy to also have Marcia Whitney, the president and CEO of Verner from North Carolina, as well as by video, Jessica Magdaleno, who is a family childcare provider and founder of the Childcare Business Institute. She's located in Southern California, and then Susan Gilmore, the founder, president, and CEO of the North Bay Children's Center, located in Northern California. So really happy to have them with us today. Go on to the next slide. So the Early Years Climate Action Task Force was made up of climate activists, climate researchers, and early learning experts. And it really activated many of us to think a lot more carefully and with a focused intent on how the early years are a very important time in children's lives and how their experiences really need to be supported and protected. So the Early Years Climate Action Plan, and the link is below, and we'll put it in the chat, recommends ways for the federal, state, and local government and early years providers, business community, philanthropic organizations, and researchers to be a part of the climate solution while supporting young children. The recommendations focus on three categories: children and families, child and family facing programs, and communities. So we encourage you to look at that resource and think about how that can be incorporated into your program and your community. Next slide. So why does this matter today? Well, childcare and early learning programs are serving our nation's youngest and most vulnerable citizens at a time of their most rapid brain development. For many of you who are on this presentation, you all know this. You are educators, you may be working with young children every day. We know how important this time of life is. And children really need to be served in places and by people that can safely and securely protect them, including from harsh elements and extreme weather conditions, which are happening more frequently. And we really need to work together at the community level, at the regional, state, and federal level to create healthier and safer environments where quality childcare and early learning programs are available to children and families when and where they need them. Next slide. So what's your why? I will speak briefly about mine, and then I'm going to turn it over to Alyssa, and she will also talk about hers. And I encourage you all to think about what's your why. Why are you here today? What are you thinking about? What's activated you to think more about this topic? And for me, it comes from a personal as well as a professional standpoint. Personally, as a mom and as the mom of somebody, a young person who has asthma, we live near the Port of Oakland, where there's a lot of, where the air quality is not as great. And this is something that I think about every day from a personal perspective. And then professionally, and people who've heard me speak before have heard me talk about this. I was visiting, along with other folks on my team, childcare programs in the Coachella Valley in Southern California, which is a very hot climate. It was in June. It was 106 degrees. We were visiting childcare programs, but none of the children could go outside because it was too hot. And there had been obviously a financial investment in the outdoor space, but the outdoor space wasn't able to be used. The play area, the play structure was too hot to be touched. The tricycles were too hot to be touched. So children had to spend the whole day in their classroom, which was really not how programs were designed. Programs were designed for children to have outdoor time to, express and develop their gross motor skills. And it really made me think about how we have to, rethink and redesign what we, how we build and create spaces for young children. So that's my why. I'm really happy to have Alyssa here. Alyssa, what's your why?
Yeah, thanks, Angie. And thanks so much for being here today, everyone. I know this is such a busy time of day for childcare educators, and I just love that you took the time to be able to come and hear the stories that are going to be shared today, because I feel like they're going to resonate with you all as you're thinking about your own experience in your classrooms and your programs across the country. My why comes to me from my 20 plus years of working in early learning programs. I was a teacher, I was a director, I supported early childhood educators throughout the state QRIS system in the state of Indiana. And I think back to my own childhood. I grew up in Southern Indiana in the 80s, where most of my time as a child was spent outdoors. Whether I was working in the garden with my grandma, who was my caregiver as an early childhood age child, or playing in the creek behind her house. We had chickens. We, picked blueberries in the summer. Most of my core memories as a young child existed outside. When I think about my own children, and I think about all of those children who came to those programs that I worked at as a teacher and then as a director, their childhoods looked a lot different. When I was younger, we spent from the time the sun went up to the sun came down outside. And when I looked at the children who came to my program and the reality of what their day looked like, it was really hard to get them outside as much as we all wanted to. I think the educators in my building and I both spent a lot of time outside as young children, but between the temperature, which was often too hot in Southern Indiana. If you've ever experienced a Southern Indiana summer, you will know it's very hot and it's very humid. Not quite, New Orleans humid, but the humidity levels are very high. There's also a lot of air quality issues. Southern Indiana is in an area that a lot of pollution comes down from factories in the Northeast, which both pollutes the water in our river, the Ohio River, and also the air. And so children not only couldn't go outside because of the temperature, they also couldn't go outside because of those air quality issues. We saw more cases of asthma rise in that time with young children in the 2000s, 2010s than we had seen in previous generations. My own children had those issues as well. My son had to use an inhaler most of the spring and summer because of his own issues going outside. So my why behind all of this is I want every child to have that experience that I was able to have as a young child, who could pick blueberries off the bush and eat them, who could dig in the dirt because there was no lead in our dirt, to be able to be outside all day long, knowing that the air was clean, the temperature was appropriate for the season we were in, and that we were able to just connect with that earth and nature in really deep and meaningful ways. So we know that that was something that we used to be able to engage with, that children, that educators were able to be outside. What we found, though, is that that's changed significantly. And if we could go to the next slide, I want to talk through some of the challenges that early childhood educators have been experiencing. Many childcare facilities lack resilience to withstand harsh weather conditions, but extreme weather is happening more and more. We're going to have some great stories about that extreme weather today, but I was even just in Indiana over the long weekend, and there was tornadoes that happened during that time. So the reality is that budgets are tight in early childhood programs. They don't have the capacity to be able to build new playground equipment, stand up new shelters regularly as these storms and weather emergencies are happening. In NAEYC's 2025 January survey of the early childhood field, nearly half, 45% of respondents reported experiencing at least one weather-related challenge in the last year. And those weather-related challenges were diverse. We've had everything from wildfires to flooding, air quality issues, severe storms, extreme heat, cold, wind. Those things are all happening almost simultaneously across the country. And early childhood educators are doing the best they can to be able to both provide that safe atmosphere for young children, but also do the things that they know are important, which is, meaning that children should be engaged in the natural world. LIIF has also been doing a lot of surveying work and found that 40% of applicants requested climate-related repairs to their facilities, like HVAC systems, shade structures, and misting systems for the extreme heat. Educators are doing the best they can to be able to do the right thing for young children, but it's becoming increasingly difficult for them to be able to do that. Next slide, please. We've got some great quotes here from early childhood educators and being able to share their experience. I'm just going to read these three out for you. A family childcare provider in California says, "I live in a tsunami hazard zone. The IGP funds were essential for me to repair my 20-plus-year-old storage shed, where I keep my emergency water and food for the daycare, as well as snack foods, toys, arts and crafts supplies, and books, and miscellaneous equipment and supplies needed to run my daycare. The roof was beginning to leak and the walls had a lot of rot. It also helped me replace the falling apart fencing and shelving around my propane tank." These are issues that are bigger even than just having children experience the outdoors. If you have a shed where you keep your supplies, we know that most early childhood programs, especially family childcare homes, never have enough storage space. They rely on these outside structures to be able to keep the supplies that the children are going to be experiencing. And so being able to access funds to help to rebuild and repair that storage shed was essential for this provider. Another family childcare provider said, "We have a small outdoor play area that currently does not have any play equipment due to extreme weather, destroying our playground last year." Imagine being able to, or not being able to, take children out and have interesting things for them to experience on the playground because the weather event has ruined that and you just don't have the funds to be able to rebuild or replace that equipment. A specialist in Florida said, "We experienced 3 hurricanes within a 3-month span. This forced a week-long shutdown." When childcare programs have to shut down because of extreme weather, not only do children suffer, they don't get that high quality experience that we know that they need to be able to be prepared to be successful later in life. Families suffer as well. Families have to work. They have to be able to do all of those things to keep their households running. And so when childcare programs have to close because of weather, everyone really suffers in that situation. Next slide, please. We also know that the health of young children suffers when we have extreme weather events. Children's physical and mental health are uniquely vulnerable to the worsening effects of climate change. Children are smaller. Their systems aren't as strong to be able to withstand air quality issues, heat-related issues. They get hotter faster when they go outside in extreme heat. Respiratory issues such as asthma and heat-related illnesses are on the rise. Like I said before, before, and Angie shared as well, our own children experienced asthma issues. And while sometimes children are able to grow out of those issues, sometimes they're not, and they can lead to really serious issues related to their health and their breathing. Chronic stress and trauma are a huge issue that early childhood educators are dealing with because of these weather-related events. As a child growing up in Southern Indiana, we always had tornadoes. We practiced tornado drills. We knew what to do, but we didn't see the significance, the extreme number of tornadoes that, typically as a child, that happened to us maybe once a year, a couple of times a year. We are seeing these things happen one after another, and children are fearful. They're scared that they're going to get hurt, that their families are going to get hurt, and they're dealing with that stress and trauma every day. And we all know that being an early childhood educator is a challenging job in and of itself. And so when we add in these health issues, these issues around stress and trauma, it just makes the job more high stakes and more complex. We want to make sure that as we move forward, we're taking these issues seriously, and we're equipping early childhood educators with the tools and the resources that they need to be able to do this most important work. Next slide. So there's also economic effects that early learning programs are challenged with. There's higher operational costs. When it's hotter outside, you have to use more air conditioning. When it's colder outside, you have to use more heat. So there's increased energy use, which is an increased cost. Ongoing maintenance of things like sheds or playground equipment. Those things are having to be replaced or repaired more often. Health insurance is getting more expensive, and oftentimes out of the reach of an early learning program to be able to provide their staff. And then those ongoing repairs and improvements are just additional costs that really eat away at the already stretched budgets of early childhood programs. Insurance premiums are something we've been talking a lot about here at NAEYC. Among program administrators in NAEYC's workforce survey, 45% reported paying more for property insurance, 62% for family child care, and 46% reported paying more for liability insurance, and 50% for family child care. Insurance premiums are becoming a real burden to early learning programs, and often they're getting canceled. Their insurance policies are getting canceled because of all of the challenges that exist. Shifting resources to respond to urgent operational needs means fewer resources to invest in core missions of care and education. So this could mean lower salaries for educators, fewer books and toys and educational materials for young children, fewer opportunities for family support, and less professional development and support for staff, which we know all of those things are essential to operating a high-quality early learning program. These problems and challenges are even more prevalent and more acute in low-income communities where we know our most vulnerable children live and experience their day. Next slide. So we talked a lot about the needs and the challenges that exist. And I want to turn it over to Marcia Whitney, who's going to give us some real world examples of what this is looking like for her leading an organization in North Carolina. Marcia, I can't wait for you to be able to share your story with this group.
Take it away?
Yeah, go for it.
Sounds good. All right. Well, I am Marcia Whitney with Werner Center for Early Learning. We are in Western North Carolina, which, as many of you are undoubtedly aware, experienced Hurricane Helene on September 27th of last year. And that not only did we get this intense hurricane, but it came after 3 days of really heavy rain that was unrelated to the hurricane. So by the time the hurricane came, our grounds were soaked. There was nowhere else for the water to go, except for to cause raging torrents. Because of our mountainous geography, all the water just poured down from the mountains to the valleys, and the valleys had unspeakable flooding. Homes, buildings, people, trucks, bridges just washed away in hours. So it caused our program to have to close actually the day before the hurricane hit because of the other heavy rains we had, and the school system's already closing. And we wound up having to be closed for 5 weeks after the hurricane, which we all know how hard that is for us as educators wanting to be with our children, and for the children and families and the caregivers who needed to be able to work outside of the home and deal with their own challenges that they faced as a result of the hurricane. We were really fortunate that our physical structures, our buildings, we operate 2 centers and a robust home visiting program. Our buildings were not harmed. Our outdoor learning environments just had a few branches that had fallen into them. So we were really fortunate from a physical structure perspective as an organization. But as a community, we absolutely were seriously impacted by loss of life and by the homes of many of our children and families and our colleagues. So we literally, I had the pharmacist who had given me my flu and COVID vaccines in mid-September. He was in his apartment building and was literally swept away in the flooding and died. So it's really just a lot of heartbreak. It happens that he also was the brother-in-law of one of my colleagues. So a lot of really intense emotional stuff in our community. And this really was unexpected and unheard of. Not a lot of community bandwidth to withstand this kind of unexpected intense storm of this nature. So what we did as an organization, we immediately jumped into action, and my trauma response was to go to get to where I could have internet and access to communicate and be a hub of communication for my whole team. We immediately had no power, no water, no internet, no phone, no even phone or cell communication. Like cell towers were knocked out. So it was literally, we had to physically go find people to be able to communicate in any way. And there were trees and major roads silent for at least a day because of the huge, I mean, I saw a 6-foot tree across one of our major intersections. It was just mind-blowing. So what we did as a team was, as best as we could, we immediately turned around and figured out how to get the food that was in our fridges and our freezers out to the families that could no longer access any food of their own. We got all of the supplies we had on our shelves, the diapers, the wipes, toilet paper, paper towels, everything we could possibly get that would benefit the young children's families that we were working with. We got them out, and we knew that we would figure out how to pay for them and how to replenish them later, which I'll come to in a little bit. We were without power and internet at either site for a full 2 weeks. And around 2 weeks later, one site got internet and power back. So that site became a hub of communications for us to figure out how we were going to navigate being able to reopen as quickly as possible. Our state legislature did take quick action within a couple of weeks. They had voted to allow flexibilities for early education programs to be able to reopen on slightly less restrictive rules than what were typical licensing and health and sanitation requires. However, I to this moment cannot tell you what any of those flexibilities were. We never really knew what they were. We weren't told what they were. I still don't know what they were. So it took us weeks to figure out, in partnership with all kinds of other early education programs in our community, we all had to figure out, okay, what is an acceptable potable water plan to be able to reopen our center, even though we don't have potable water coming through our pipes. So we literally, it was the blind leading the visually impaired, as different programs shared, well, I got this plan approved. Oh my gosh, what's your plan look like? And we just kind of figured it out together as an early education community. As we all know, we're nothing but great problem solvers in the field of early education. So about 3 weeks after the hurricane hit, we got non-potable water back, and it wasn't for 2 months that we had potable water back. So for about a month, we were operating with our finally licensing and health and sanitation approved potable water plan, but it literally was big plastic jugs that I had ordered on Amazon, had delivered in another state, rented a minivan to drive to Western North Carolina with over the one interstate that was open that I could actually get through to get back to Asheville with. And we literally just set up these big potable water jugs, and we had to take them off site. And then we had to have our food and nutrition team boiling water in 30 gallons at a time in the tilt skillet in the kitchen. and then dumping that water into big sanitized garbage bins so that we could then put it into all of these different jugs. It was hours a day. So it was quite an adventure, and I'll stop there because I know we have other things we want to talk about too.
Wow, Marcia, that was quite an experience and story, and I'm so glad that you're, back up and running. But I'm sure we'll hear more from you in a little bit. But thank you very much for telling your story. And as we are transitioning to our video, I will just say also, Alyssa, I did not grow up in Indiana, but my parents and my grandparents did, and I have a lot of memories being outside in central and southern Indiana. And I grew up in Michigan, so doing those tornado drills was something I'm very familiar with. We're going to transition to our next provider story. This is Jessica Magdaleno, who is a family child care provider in Southern California. And she is also on the negotiation team for the Family Child Care Union and head and founder of the Child Care Business Institute. And so this is a recorded video from her talking about her experience.
Hola, mi nombre es Jessica Magdaleno. He sido proveedora de cuidado infantil durante 25 años en la ciudad de Garden Grove, California. Child Care Business Institute nació en el 2009 al ver la necesidad y la falta de información para los nuevos emprendedores en este campo. Trabajamos con proveedoras para fortalecer su confianza y formar defensoras que representen a otras proveedoras en el Departamento de Licencia, en el Congreso y la legislatura. Los vientos de Santa Ana estaban derribando mi estructura de sombra improvisada. Sabía que necesitaba una estructura permanente y con la ayuda de los fondos del LIIF y también con los fondos que me dio Children's Home Society, pude instalar estructuras resistentes en el frente y el patio trasero de mi hogar para proteger mejor a los niños del calor extremo. Más proveedoras de cuidado infantil necesitan el apoyo de servir y proteger a más niños. Es fundamental contar con apoyos para las proveedoras a fin de atender mejor las necesidades de nuestra infancia.
Well, thank you. And as you can see in the brief that accompanies this webinar, there are before and after pictures that she also had up on her video showing her front yard and her backyard, with the Santa Ana winds blowing down her shade structure, and then finally getting the funding to be able to put in a permanent shade structure. And what a difference that makes for the children and just to not have to waste materials. So you have something that's permanent. So I really appreciate her contributing that video and telling her story. And when she talks about the funding from the Low Income Investment Fund, that funding is actually from the Infrastructure Grant Program, which is funded by the state of California. Very grateful for the state of California for funding not just repair and renovations, but also new construction. So now I'm really pleased to turn it over to Susan Gilmore, who is the founder and president CEO of the North Bay Children's Center, and her programs received not just repair and renovation funding, but also funding for major construction. And I'd like her to tell her story and talk more about how extreme weather is affecting her program. Thanks for being here, Susan.
Well, thank you, Angie, for having me. North Bay Children's Center provides full-day, year-round childcare to over 600 infants, toddlers, and preschoolers across 14 sites in 2 Northern California counties. So the majority of our families that we serve are extremely low income and rely on state subsidies for childcare. So as we know, optimal child development depends on stable families, schools, and communities, all of which are threatened at the same time during climate-related disasters. All 14 of our locations are in climate vulnerable areas, with 9 located in wildfire evacuation zones for over 3 consecutive years. So we've experienced repeated disruptions due to wildfires, poor air quality, and PG&E power shutoffs. And we've seen firsthand the physical and emotional impact that environmental factors have on young children. And we've learned that during events like these, access to safe, nurturing, predictable classroom environments have never been more important. So our first major crisis was the Tubbs fire in 2017, which began without warning. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I received a call from our program director whose parents had just lost their home in Coffey Park. She was also in contact with several of our teaching staff that had just been evacuated. By 6 a.m., our leadership team convened to plan next steps. And I have to tell you, there was no roadmap for this. We were on our own. So we quickly put together Google spreadsheets for each of our locations and began real-time tracking of on the whereabouts of our families, our staff, and that were in the impacted areas. And so it was important for us to know who lost homes, where are the families relocated to, do they need supplies, and most importantly, when this event is over, and we had no idea what that looked like, will they be returning to our program? Are they still with us? We used our Facebook page to communicate with parents, because one day one community would be fine, the next day that community would be an evacuation area. And many of our programs are located on elementary school sites, which all closed. The minute anything was happening, whether they were in evacuation areas or not, all of those school sites closed. So we had to close our classrooms in evacuation areas, and we did recognize the need to keep children out of shelters. And together with familiar teachers, classmates, and familiar routines at alternate locations, which meant operating in unlicensed facilities. So regulations that are critical during normal day-to-day operations became an obstacle in achieving that goal. So we did work closely with community care licensing, informing them of our plans, and they in turn looked to us to help create regulations for operating in extreme emergency situations. So after the Tubbs fire, we began building long-term sustainable solutions to mitigate the effects of climate-related events. And our goal was to raise awareness, build resiliency, and inspire children to enjoy and love the natural world, and eventually grow up to be stewards of the planet. So these solutions we were managing in 3 different categories: facilities, processes, and practices. And as Angie said, we had just started the construction of our main campus, which is a 20,000 square foot structure that, once complete, will represent best practices in child development and environmental stewardship. So we were very lucky to have funding from the infrastructure grant program. And after our wildfire and pandemic experience, we added an additional layer of infrastructure elements to the construction plans to reduce business interruptions and ensure healthy environments for young children. So under processes, we adopted strategies to minimize school closures and strengthen communication with parents and staff during fluid and sometimes chaotic events. And we adopted policies that reduce energy consumption and support sustainability. And during the wildfires, our childcare sites, just like Marcia indicated with her story, quickly became the hub that linked parents, teachers, and children to the resources they needed to cope with trauma and personal tragedy. So we established systems to quickly connect our families and staff to financial and emotional support available in our service areas. And under practices, it became very clear to us that we needed all of our teachers at all of our locations to go through trainings on trauma-informed childcare, which was really important, which we continue to do. And then we help build resiliency through our Garden of Eden nature-based curriculum, which integrates nutrition and climate awareness lessons into our daily activities. And we've learned that school gardens are extremely therapeutic and healing places of refuge for children, while fostering that deeper sense, fostering a deeper relationship between children and the earth. So I know you'll have more questions that I'm available.
Yeah, that's
to answer.
great. Yeah, thank you so much, Susan. It's really great to hear your story, and I'm sure you can hear the themes, similar themes between Marcia's story and Susan's story. Different parts of the country, different types of extreme weather events, but very similar experiences. And so now I just want to take a moment. This could feel very heavy, and I want to lift up the fact that educators, early educators, are very resilient. I hesitate to use the word scrappy, because we really shouldn't have to just be scrappy. Early educators should be well supported. And so we're going to talk about solutions, because there are things that communities can do. There are things that educators can do. There are things that, supporters, philanthropy, government, decision makers can do to help support early educators and the early care and education sector in the face of more extreme weather. The first one is around infrastructure improvements. And so you can see this familiar picture here of Jessica's before and after pictures. So why should we do this? Well, it enhances service reliability. It means programs can often stay open, or they can operate at a more efficient financial level, because they may have solar power now, so they can reduce their energy costs. It expands the lifespan of assets. So look at the resources that were wasted with the shade structure being blown down. And I believe that was not the first time it was blown down. So having a permanent shade structure that can withstand the elements. These should be intentionally structured to include programs operating in centers, schools, as well as homes. And we should include investments for HVAC systems, because clean air and protecting children from pollution is extremely important for their growing lungs and their growing bodies. It's also very important to protect the workers, the educators who are working, year upon year in these settings. It should also include sustainable landscaping and green systems that includes roofs, solar powered, shaded outdoor play areas, and adaptive management strategies. Let's go to the next slide. The second area is around enhanced emergency preparedness and response. So you could hear the stories of Marcia and Susan and talking about how they were like, there was no roadmap for this. We figured this out. We got calls in the middle of the night. We put these things together. They were able to put plans together. But what we found, and what NAEYC found in many of their, in some of their surveys, is that a lot of times early educators are not connected into the community planning process for emergency preparedness, but they are often extremely closely in close communication with their families. They see their families multiple times a day. They know where those children and those families are. So they really play a key role in planning and preparing for emergencies. They can also, as Marcia and Susan said, help families and children cope and recover afterwards. You need support to develop and implement comprehensive strategies and needed upgrades to emergency plans for evacuation, communication, and the continuity of care. They need to make sure they know what those new emergency regulations are. They need to have that information. It needs to be communicated. There need to be community at the local, regional, state, and federal level coordination, and to be able to access professional development and training in disaster response and mental health to really effectively support themselves, the families, and the children in the community during and after climate-related events. Next slide. And the third area is community and workforce support and resources. So why is this important? Because educators need and can benefit from support from each other, as well as partner organizations in responding and adapting to extreme weather. Policymakers and philanthropists or philanthropies can also facilitate and invest in partnerships between ECE programs, local health departments, environmental organizations, and emergency services, and networks for shared services, operational supports, Benefits like health insurance, as you saw earlier, insurance is becoming an issue. So how can we make sure that programs can be protected so they can have funding to rebuild, but also health insurance too. Mutual aid between and among government entities and early childhood providers, centers, family childcare homes to enhance collective resilience. Okay, so that I wanted to draw your attention to these resources. These are also all included in our brief, which should be communicated to you in the question and answer session. We are now at the part where we can do the question and answer session. And we have more questions that I'm going to ask from Marcia and for Susan while we are collecting any questions that you might put in the Q&A, which you are welcome to do. They'll be reviewed, and Alyssa will be choosing a couple of questions from there. So for Marcia and Susan, whoever of you, and you can go ahead and take off the deck so we can spotlight the providers. Can you share a little bit more about your practical experiences with grants supporting infrastructure improvements if you received them? For example, how did you find a contractor, access the grants, handle the payments? How accessible and available are these? Go ahead.
Marcia will probably agree with me, but it's very difficult to find these grants. I mean, we have a project that in 2017 was $7.5 million. We're going to finish it in 2 months, and it's now $12.5 million. And so construction costs continue to escalate. And it's been really difficult for us to find funding for the HVAC system that we're putting in with the dual air filtration systems. For all of we are not installing yet solar panels, which was part of the plan because we just don't have the funding. And it's very, very difficult to find those grants. The infrastructure grant was fabulous through LIIF, but that was just one tiny part, one segment of the funds that we needed to raise to make this project happen. We are fortunate. Where we've been very successful right now is working with our local service organizations. We had just this last weekend 9 Rotary groups out at the site doing all of our landscaping, and we've greened up the entire outdoor area, and everything is edible. And once those 60 people came in and saw what we were doing, suddenly they had resources. Oh, my friend can provide all of the materials you need for your irrigation system. So getting the community involved has been really helpful, but it's taken us a long time to spark that interest. And once they're on site and seeing what we're doing, then they can step up and help us with in-kind contributions. But the grants have been very, very difficult for us to find.
Yeah, I'm sure that is very true. And that's a lot of work to put all of those volunteers together. So, that's no small feat. And, Susan, just having, witnessed many of the years that you've been putting this project together, these are huge undertakings. Yeah. Marcia, anything to add?
Yeah, well, we did have a bit of luck. I definitely agree with Susan. These are not the easiest grants to find. We're fortunate that we do have one private family foundation in our community that their whole focus is children and capital improvements. So when we were doing our capital campaign, we actually were able to do our capital campaign to build a new building in 7 grants because our local county has a fund for early childhood education and development. Whether they'll be able to fund it this year with hurricane recovery stuff remains to be seen, but at least they were really helpful in the years they did have capacity to make investments to help us improve our infrastructure. This family foundation did give us really nice funding to create really beautiful outdoor learning environments at our new site. So as with Susan's programming, the outdoor learning environments, our experiential gardens are really foundationally embedded within our curriculum and so important for the children. We try to do everything possible outside when we can. And one part that we discovered after opening our new site was that there really was more sun on the site than we had anticipated. So we went back to this family foundation and asked them to do one more smaller grant to do the shade sails. And I'm proud to report that they did fund it, and they were really great quality shade sails that survived the hurricane. Our shade sails were up when the hurricane hit, and they made it. So it is worthwhile to invest upfront in the higher quality materials because they're going to have the staying power. So we were really fortunate. Those were all through just our county funding and through that private family foundation.
That's great. Yeah, you're very fortunate to have that. That's really wonderful to hear that story, Marcia. So also from a policy perspective, we're really interested in how policy can support you in working through these complicated nuts and bolts of, preparedness and recovery. What lessons learned can you share that would make it easier and more accessible and effective for both of you? And Marcia, do you want to go first?
Sure. The biggest lesson really is that having the relationships before a crisis, doing the proactive relationship building is so critical, because when you're in crisis, you're in crisis. We were really fortunate. Again, our state did allow flexibilities, but one flexibility we were not allowed was we couldn't even have our educators doing informal education in the community because we're a licensed child care center, and that would have violated our child care license. And that was not a flexibility that they allowed us to have, which is why we were closed for 5 weeks. We could have easily been supporting children and families, and we weren't allowed to because of policy regulations. But I spent a lot of my time doing advocacy work at the local level, the statewide level, and to a lesser extent, the federal level, because we understand that that's really where the foundational long-term support is possible. And North Carolina, I'm sure many of you are aware, is a very purple tending red state. Children and families should not be a political issue or a partisan issue, but they are for a lot of the people in terms of what investments are going to be prioritized. But I want to really be in partnership with all of our elected officials of every political stripe, just to help elevate the children and families and the needs of our children and families, and how we all know the best return on investment we as a society can make is in the first 2,000 days, and conservative estimates of a 1 to 13 or a 13 to 1 return on investment. We all know this. So I'm just trying to raise that up whenever I can with those who have the power to make decisions that hopefully will help us to partner with them for long-term sustainable solutions.
Thank you, Marcia.
Mixed success, but we try.
Yeah. Susan?
No, those relationships with licensing are really, really critical before you get into the kind of disaster that we were faced with. And in California, school districts don't have to be licensed. I mean, school facilities, elementary school facilities don't have to be licensed. So we had that to kind of work with when we were choosing to operate in schools that didn't need to be closed, but they were for poor air quality, but it's poor air quality everywhere. And so we were allowed to utilize those classrooms where we relocated kids to that were in evacuation areas. But we did let licensing know because we want to be licensed. But it was really important that regulatory restrictions need to be relaxed during these kinds of situations, and waived, allowing us to do what's best for children. Get them, and because you're looking at all the trauma that they're experiencing, and for the children in living through the wildfires. We had kids that were evacuated many times. They would evacuate from their home, and then 2 days later, whatever friends they're staying with, now their home is in jeopardy. And so to be able to have that stability in a classroom during all this chaos was really critical. I think requiring us all to have continued operating plans, because we were just like Marcia said, you're just making it up with your colleagues. What do we do? How should we do this? If we think ahead of time, and there's actually a template for that licensing could put forward with, here's what you need for a continued operating plan. Under what conditions do you absolutely close, and how do you notify people, and how will you remain open, and who makes that call? And then I think emergency services, fire and police should be able to access a statewide database that identifies where every childcare center is in the family childcare home is in the community. They have that for schools. They don't have that for childcare. And again, if this was during the day and and luckily this all happened in the middle of the night, so kids weren't already in school when this was happening, but I feel that we're very vulnerable there if something was happening during the day and fire protection and police don't know that, hey, there's a childcare center here or a family childcare home here. And then again, just being at the table with our emergency operations centers in each county, childcare's not. I mean, we happen to be because I go sit at the table, but but school districts are, and we should be part of that infrastructure that discusses how these things are going to play out when an emergency happens. So those are things I'm still working on.
Yeah, I want to lift up one question that's come in through the Q&A, and this is just going to be a rapid fire. You have both been through these really significant weather events and had to essentially create these emergency response plans in real time. What's one thing that you would want to share with other early learning educators or leaders that you are taking away from your experience that would maybe help them if they're thinking about creating an emergency plan for themselves?
Go ahead, Susan, I'll follow.
I don't know. It was such a unique, I mean, who would have ever thought? I mean, that this would happen, and it was happening. And I think that you could have a great plan, but our teachers that maybe were in charge of executing the plan, they were experiencing the same thing. So we had people in leadership positions. They were out, they were down, they were dealing with their own families. So it was really figuring out how to mobilize your resources that aren't impacted and not, whatever great plan you have in place, the people that are there to execute it may not be available. And so that was a real aha moment for me. And understanding that we're all going through this, but every decision we were making was what is best for the kids. This is, what we're going to do, what's best for these children, what's best for these families, and what's best for our teachers, and use common sense.
Marcia?
Well, all of what Susan's describing, it aligns nicely with what we've done at Werner as well. Before the crisis, we had already put into place an emergency leadership plan, which includes that preventive relationship building with our team and with our communities and our elected officials before a crisis. So that's the first page of our plan, is preventing, having the strong relationships and foundational connections in the community, which we do have in a lot of ways, as do many of the early education programs across our country. We also have then, okay, when crisis hits, what do you do? And so I literally have now, it's a page and a half of bullet points of what we do. And it includes everything down to with it, immediately calling a senior leadership team conversation with our senior leadership team, with our center directors, if they're available, program directors. And I even have a draft, like an agenda template kind of thing, because when you're in that kind of a crisis, you don't want to have to be thinking about what are the things we need to be thinking about. You just want to have it in black and white, and you can refer to what you've already put together. The one thing that really came up for me in this crisis that we didn't have on that plan that we do now is, what do you do if you can't communicate with each other? When we had put these plans together, we assumed internet and power access. We now know we can't assume internet and power access. So now we have at 2 p.m. on the second day after the crisis, show up at this location first, if you can get there. If you can't get to that location, show up at location number 2. And if you can't get to that site, then show up at this other community location number 3. Hopefully we'll never have to get to this again, but it's just kind of, again, building the plane as you're flying it, and figuring things out and using all those great problem solving skills that every day in our classrooms, all of our educators and all of our team members are using these great problem solving skills.
Wow. I mean, so many things that you just don't think about until it's happening to you. But I'm certain that even if you're not thinking about it right now, you've put some additional systems into place that you will leverage. I'm thinking, Susan, about the spreadsheet that you were talking about where children and families are. You have that now, and I'm certain you're going to be updating that as you go forward. It's just I think you're right. This is all about resilience, flexibility, problem solving, all the things that early educators honestly are doing every day in their classroom, working alongside young children, but just taking it to that larger scale. Thank you both for your time and your answers to your questions. Angie, you want to close us out for the day?
Yeah, thank you, Alyssa. And a huge thanks to Susan and Marcia, as well as to Jessica. And also wanted to say thank you to our team at LIIF, Georgia Gillen, Leslie Hutchinson, Samantha Payton, who helped with the webinar as well as with the brief, and then to our NAEYC folks, particularly Afua Emily Quay, who did the major writing of the brief, and Megan Salas Atwell, Lauren Hogan, and of course my co-presenter and co-host, Alyssa. Super thanks to all of you, and we really hope you have a great rest of your day and a wonderful Earth Day. Thank you, everybody.